$340 billion dollar gone. Not to American companies, not to Lockheed Martin, not to General Dynamics, not to Raytheon. Gone to Canada, gone to Sweden, gone to anyone but the country that thought it had locked up the biggest allied defense market in North America for the next decade. And it happened 2 days ago on February 17th, 2026. While Washington was still processing the House vote that rebuked Trump's tariffs, while markets were absorbing another round of Truth Social threats, Mark Carney walked into a military facility in Montreal and detonated a financial bomb that nobody in the American media is talking about today. But they will be, because what he announced isn't just a policy shift, it's a declaration. And the number attached to it should be on every front page in America. But it's not about the money. Let me show you what's really happening. Here is the surface-level story as Washington is selling it. Canada is a difficult trading partner. Canada signed a suspicious deal with China. Canada ran anti-tariff ads with Ronald Reagan's voice. Canada's Prime Minister keeps refusing to call Trump to negotiate. So Trump is frustrated. Markets have shrugged off his latest threats. His Gordie Howbridge ultimatum barely moved the DAO. The tariff war is background noise at this point. That's the story they want you to accept. The real story is that 48 hours ago, Canada formally announced it is redirecting 470 billion Canadian dollars, that is 470 billion Canadian dollars, which converts to roughly 340 billion American dollars away from the United States defense industrial base. And the timing isn't coincidental. It is a direct, calculated response to Donald Trump signing his executive order titled the America First Arms Transfer Strategy just days earlier. Trump wanted American weapons companies to dominate Allied procurement. Canada responded by announcing it will build its own weapons industry instead. That isn't a trade dispute. That is economic warfare conducted with spreadsheets and procurement contracts instead of bombs. Let me walk you through exactly what Carney announced, because the details reveal a level of strategic precision that makes Trump's approach look improvised. Over the next 10 years, Canada will spend 180 billion Canadian dollars, 131 billion American dollars directly on military hardware and systems. That number alone would rank Canada among the largest defense spenders in NATO. But it does not stop there. $290 billion Canadian dollars. Another 201 billion American dollars goes to defense-related infrastructure, shipyards, manufacturing facilities, research labs, training complexes. The kind of permanent industrial capacity that takes decades to build and once built never comes back to foreign contractors. Combined, that is 470 billion Canadian dollars. $342 billion that the American defense industry thought it was going to collect the same way it has been collecting Canadian defense contracts for the better part of 60 years. Here is what that means in practice. Right now, according to Carney himself, 75 cents of every federal dollar Canada spends on military equipment goes to American companies. 75 cents. Canada has been one of the most reliable captive markets for the American defense industry for generations. Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, L3Harris, Raytheon. All of them have Canadian subsidiaries specifically because Canada has historically mandated domestic industrial participation. The contract still flowed north. The profit still flowed south. For decades, that was the deal. Carney just tore it up. The new target is this. Within 10 years, 70% of all Canadian federal defense contracts go to Canadian firms. Today, that number sits at 43%. That 27 percentage point swing on a $180 billion procurement budget represents roughly $48 billion shifted from American contractors to Canadian ones over the decade. Add the infrastructure spending, and you are looking at the systematic defunding of an American industry that has operated in Canada like a utility. Guaranteed revenue, political protection, no competition. That era ended on Tuesday. Now, here is where the F-35 becomes the centerpiece of this story, because it is the single contract that most visibly illustrates the trap the Trump administration has built for itself. In June 2023, Canada signed a contract with Lockheed Martin for 88 F-35 stealth fighters. Total contract value approximately 19 billion Canadian dollars, which at current exchange rates is roughly 13.8 billion American dollars. Canada has already paid for the first 16 jets set for delivery in early 2026. Those deliveries will likely proceed. But Carney has now directed his defense team to examine whether to switch the remaining 72 jets, the bulk of the program, to the Swedish-built Saab Griffin. Why? Because Saab offered something Lockheed Martin never would: full assembly in Canada, complete transfer of intellectual property. Canada builds the planes. Canadian workers, Canadian facilities, Canadian technical knowledge. Every F-35 maintenance and software upgrade currently requires work in the United States. Under the Griffin deal, Canada owns the entire supply chain domestically. The implications for American defense contractors are catastrophic if this becomes a template, because Canada is not alone. Germany is watching, Australia is watching, Japan is watching. Every NATO ally that has been buying American weapons systems under the assumption that America is a reliable long-term partner is now reconsidering that assumption because Donald Trump spent 12 months threatening the country that shares the longest undefended border on Earth with annexation, tariffs, economic destabilization, and now a public veto over their own infrastructure. Think about that bridge. On February 8, 2026, Trump threatened to block the opening of the Gordie Howe International Bridge, a $5.7 billion Canadian project connecting Windsor, Ontario to Detroit, Michigan. Canada paid for it. Canada built it. Canada owns it. But Trump said he would not allow it to open because he objects to the tolling structure, because Canada earns the revenue to repay its construction costs. His own transportation secretary had been working on a handover ceremony for months. Trump blew it up on Truth Social in a single post because he watched too much cable news that morning. In the fortune analysis published the same day, an investor noted something that should have been terrifying for the White House. Markets barely moved. Overnight, the president threatened to veto the opening of a critical basinal trade artery, and investors in New York and London shrugged. A year ago, that would have sent the Canadian dollar into freefall. Instead, the loonie held. The Canadian market shrugged. That is not confidence in Trump's leverage. That is the market pricing in the fact that Canada has already found other options. And here is the data point that nobody announced loudly enough this morning. Statistics. Canada released figures today, February 19, 2026. Canada's trade deficit for 2025 came in at 31.3 billion Canadian dollars, the widest annual trade shortfall on record outside of the CO9 pandemic. Exports dropped 0.2% overall, but exports to the United States specifically fell 5.8%. 8%. That is a staggering number. Canada's entire economy is built on North American trade integration. A 5.8% collapse in exports to its largest partner in a single year is the kind of structural damage that takes decades to repair. But here is the thing about that number that the White House is not acknowledging. Canada ran a record deficit and kept fighting. Canada ran a record deficit and announced a $340 billion defense pivot. Canada ran a record deficit and is still negotiating uranium supply chains with India, trade deals with ASEAN, and agricultural agreements with China. The pain is real. The capitulation is not happening now. Some will say this is all posturing. Canada cannot actually afford to walk away from American defense systems. The F-35 transition would cost billions in penalties. A mixed fighter fleet would create two separate maintenance systems, two training pipelines, two supply chains. The Canadian military establishment has resisted this for years. That analysis was correct 12 months ago. What changed is that Trump gave Canada's political leadership a domestic mandate it never had before. When 91% of Canadians tell pollsters they want to reduce reliance on the United States as a trading partner, the political calculus for accepting short-term pain to achieve long-term independence becomes straightforward. The F-35 penalty clause becomes a one-time cost. The alternative, remaining strategically dependent on a partner that has publicly discussed absorbing you as a 51st state, carries risks that no CFO can actually quantify. And this is where the emergency meeting comes in, because the White House did not see this coming. Not at this scale, not with this speed. 3 days after Trump signed his America First arms transfer strategy, designed explicitly to force American weapons on allied governments, Canada announced it was going the opposite direction. That is not a coincidence. That is a direct message. And the message was written in the language that Washington actually understands. Contracts, billions, procurement decisions that once made last for 30 years. What Trump wanted from Canada was simple. He wanted Carney to pick up the phone, fly to Mar-a-Lago, sit across from him, and negotiate publicly in a way that looked like submission. Carney has refused every single time. Instead, he has taken the phone calls that matter. Xi Jinping, Narendra Modi, Ursula von der Leyen, the leaders of the countries that are building the alternative architecture that makes American pressure less effective by the week. Gold trading above $5,500 an ounce right now for the first time in modern history. Global central bank gold reserves have overtaken combined holdings in American dollars. Central banks are not making political statements. They are managing risk. And the risk they are managing is American unpredictability. Here is what this means for you specifically. If you work in American defense manufacturing, the Carney announcement is the most significant threat to your industry since the Cold War ended. The American defense export model depends on allies who believe in American reliability. Canada's pivot does not just take 180 billion Canadian dollars off the table. It gives every other ally a template for how to do it. Sweden's Saab just became the most important alternative fighter jet program in the Western Hemisphere. If Canada completes this shift and demonstrates that the transition works, the next country that signs with Boeing or Lockheed will have to factor in whether Washington might weaponize that contract against them too. If you drive a car assembled in North America, you are living inside the most complicated supply chain ever built between two countries. And that supply chain is being deliberately dismantled in real time. General Motors has already told investors to expect $3 to $4 billion in tariff costs embedded in their 2026 operations. Those costs do not disappear. They become the price of the car you are financing, the price of the truck your business is leasing, the price of the replacement parts your mechanic is ordering. If you are watching this from anywhere outside the United States, understand that what is unfolding is not a trade dispute. It is a live demonstration of what happens when the world's most powerful economy decides to treat its closest partner as an adversary. And the verdict expressed not in speeches, but in procurement decisions and trade agreements and gold, prices and shifting supply chains is that the model of American economic order is being revised downward. Pay attention to what happens with the F-35 contract over the next 60 days. If Canada formally notifies Lockheed Martin that it is reviewing the remaining 72 aircraft and initiating parallel procurement discussions with Saab, that is the moment this goes from policy announcement to executed strategy. Watch whether any Senate Republicans break ranks on the tariff vote the way their House colleagues did, and what Trump, threatens them within response. Watch the gold price, not as a commodity, as a verdict. Every dollar it rises above $5,500 is a market telling you something about how the world's financial institutions now assess the reliability of Washington. And watch Mark Carney, because in 12 months he has done something that no one predicted. He turned the pressure of a larger, more powerful neighbor into domestic political fuel, international credibility, and a $340 billion industrial policy. That does not happen by accident. It happens when someone understands exactly what their adversary values and then withdraws it. The emergency meeting was not about tariffs. The emergency is that the leverage is gone, and $340 billion just made that official.